Okay, you've got the bug. You're going to go work for a small company, maybe even a startup or a venture-backed company. You've heard about all the people that have had great experiences, met super people. They're on a mission to change the world, and they made millions of dollars when their company got acquired or went public, and you want a piece of that action. It all sounds wonderful, but the grass is often greener on the other side. Today, we're going to look at the risks and some of the potential hazards of working for a startup company so you're not blindsided. Jump on board. We're going to run through that right now. Welcome to the Dream Job America pod. This is Tim Tonella. I am your host. And this is a channel where we talk about all things hiring with an emphasis on strategies, tools, and tactics for finding your next dream job. Now, today we're going to talk about something very important when you're looking to make that transition down to an earlier stage company, often referred to as a small company or an institutionally backed company, or sometimes it falls under the moniker of a startup. These are companies, as we've said before, that have a limited amount of funding, usually between $4 and $100 million. They have institutional capital, so professional investors that are going to want to get a return for their shareholders or limited partners in their funds. They often have a handful of employees, up to several hundred, and they may have a couple million in revenue, or maybe even 25, 50, 75, or $100 million in revenue, but they fit a very specific profile. And you've heard of a lot of companies going public. When a company goes public and their stock's worth a lot of money, that's what we typically refer to as a venture-backed company or a startup company that's developed and had a successful exit. Now, it all sounds great, except there are some specific downsizes and risks, and that's what we're going to talk about today. But before we get started, I'd ask you to please subscribe to this channel. Any new subscription does make a difference, and the more subscribers I get, it's going to allow me to place more time in making great content to help you, and it really does make a difference, so I'd be very appreciative if you go ahead and do that. Okay, so if you live in the Silicon Valley, San Francisco, the East Coast, the West Coast, Austin, Chicago, Seattle, Kansas City, St. Louis, Michigan, Chicago, you name it, there are pockets of venture capital investment, and you probably know somebody that's worked for a startup or a venture-backed tech company, and they sold their company, made a bunch of money, and they're off to the races, and you want part of that action. It all sounds great, except there are serious downsides and serious risks. And when you're making your decision, you got to look at the pros and cons and weigh what's worth the risk for you and where you're willing to take that challenge on and go for it. And so today we're going to talk about that. Risk number one. So downside number one, first and foremost, is that most earlier stage companies, certainly the beginning part of their development, those formidable early years, are resource constrained. Now, the resources can be human resources, people. It can be financial, such as capital. It can be ideas. There's lots of different constraints, but it's a big risk factor. When you have to go out and do something, you just may not have the money. You may have to do it on your own. Be more creative, work longer hours, or maybe even go without. There's always that risk of resource constraint. If you want to bring somebody on, you may not have the money to bring them on right now. You also always worry about the issue of running out of the funding, right? And not being able to do some of the things that you want to do, whereas it's very easy to go to a bigger company and just request permission from your boss to allocate capital based on that larger budget. You may not have the money to do the level of marketing that you want, or go to the conventions or trade shows or conferences that you want. All these things come into a smaller company. Now, yes, that's why they're hiring people that are scrappy and creative and innovative. But if you're used to working in an environment where you have lots of resources and assistance and outsourced partners that are on contract to help you, you also often find yourself in a single rowboat in a smaller pond, and that's a different type of anxiety that you're going to face. And number two, in that light, the company can die on the vine very quickly. So if they don't hit their milestones, and many milestones that you may not even know about if you're not at the very top of the C-suite, the company runs out of cash and they're basically dead. They fold, they get acquired for nothing. The investors get some money. It's called liquidation preferences. Everybody else gets nothing and you're out on the street. That can certainly happen. A company could get acquired very, very quickly. And if you have not had enough time for your equity to bake or grow, you may not meet all your various vesting years. You may find that, wow, I joined this organization, they get acquired by a bigger company. I really didn't make much money. And a larger company may be looking for economies of scale and may start eliminating duplicative positions, including your own. Number 3, as we alluded to in an earlier video, there's no guarantee at all that your equity is going to be worth anything. For that matter, I would say that the likelihood of your equity really being worth something in the long term is slim. Now, the opportunity to roll the dice and get lucky or be successful through hard work or with the right team, have an exit and make a bunch of money is there. You're on the right playing field, but it's still a smaller share of people that actually do that. And some people, what they do is they take the option of doing lots of different startups, almost like a venture capitalist, but you do it with your own job. And you keep rolling the dice. We have a small percentage success, but you keep on going back for these same opportunities, hoping that one's going to finally hit. And that's a strategy, but there's no guarantee at all. If that company gets acquired for a low amount of money, if it gets acquired for something that's under the investor liquidation preferences, the company runs out of money, if they just don't quite hit their strides as a business and the competition comes in and crushes them, then that investment and that time will not provide any type of stock back end for you. Now, number 4 is that compensation generally at a smaller company is going to be less than you're going to see at a larger company, specifically at the executive level. Now, that doesn't mean that the execs aren't paid really well, but they're not going to be paid at the level of a multi-billion-dollar company at all. Usually the perks that are associated with that are not financial perks. It's not, huge programs where you're going on business meetings in other countries and other cities, spending a ton of money. Usually don't have huge expense budgets. Companies have to scrap. They have to watch every dollar. And so the overall compensation in terms of base salary and bonuses, I find, tends to be a little lower. Now, in some roles, it can be quite high. I mean, if you're in a sales or business development function and you negotiate a compensation structure that is heavily oriented on the variable side towards more growth, you can structure something that's really great, that's as good, if not better, than in a large company. But I think overall, when you work for a smaller company, the compensation is less, but you're seeking non-financial benefits, some things that we talked about before, the ability to develop these critical skills that you can leverage later on, maybe the ability to jump from one position in terms of a title to the next, and then you can leverage that title at a larger company once you have a couple of years of experience under your belt for a larger amount of money. But generally speaking, the smaller amount of money is going to be associated with a smaller company. As you get lower down into a pure startup, Series A funded mode, it's going to be much more on the lower end. Again, doesn't mean you're not going to make a great living, doesn't mean it's not totally worth it, but it often is going to be lower than you would see at a much larger company. And number 5, the flip side of working with a very small, tight senior leadership team is that when you have a fallout with one of those individuals, it can kind of be the kiss of death for you. In a big company, if you have a problem with your boss, well, there's another division you can go to. There's another person you can work for. If you hang around long enough, that person may fall out. I find that with a smaller company, it's very different. If you're reporting into the CEO or someone else in the C-suite, they tend to stay. They are the drivers of the culture, and that's not going to really change that much. And if you're kind of involved with somebody every day, as we talked about in earlier videos, and part of that, the benefit is that collegial aspect of always having an open door, always sharing your ideas, always having that banter back and forth. But now all of a sudden, you just can't stand that person you're working with, then it's probably going to lead to your having to make a decision to leave. And one of the final disadvantages, and I'm saying this kind of funny tongue-in-cheek, but there's a lot of truth to it, it's a much harder sale to your family. I mean, it really is. Not that big companies don't work you to death. Of course, we know people in those environments. But when you're in a startup, I mean, you have no choice. When you're in a leadership role and there's an issue or a problem, a lot of times you're the only resource. And when a critical problem occurs in the middle of the night or over a weekend, you're kind of stuck doing that. You have to do whatever it takes to get that company out of that bind, to move on. Hey, you wanted to make an impact, right? That's where you come into a small company. Well, that impact means that you have to make that impact in both the good and the challenging times. Maybe you're making less money, and that's going to mean your budget's going to be a little tighter for a year with your family. It's a harder sell because people always look, or they perceive that going to a smaller company often has a higher risk profile. And let's say you're 35, 40 years old with 3 kids, and you talk to your partner or your spouse, and you tell them you want to make the transition because of all these wonderful things. You get to work with great people, and maybe you'll have an equity package that will become a huge win in an IPO, and you get to learn all these critical skills, and it's just super exciting and innovative to be on the edge of the envelope. Well, that's really great for you, but don't ever forget the other person, the spouse, the children. They're often looking at that as, that doesn't sound so great. Sounds like less potential time with me, maybe more stress on you, anxiety. And so these companies often don't get to the next milestone, and the stock's not worth anything, and then you're looking for a new job fairly quickly. That doesn't sound so great to us. And one thing I was told a long time ago, and I have seen this, and I've really come to understand this as I've grown older, and I'm a father, family of 4 kids, is that when your spouse gives you a nudge, that nudge, a little nudge, is often like a massive push off a cliff. If they nudge you in the right direction, it's like Adrian telling Rocky in that movie, go out and win, and boom, the music's starting and you're in the gym, you're pumping it up and you're going for the kill. If they say, hey, that sounds really risky, do you really want to put us through this, and it doesn't work out, well, you may hear about it forever, or it may just make the opportunity for you to take another risk, do another flyer down the road, that much more difficult. So it is a much harder sale, and it's a different experience for the family. Again, there's no right or wrong. It comes down to what you want to achieve, what's important to you, what's going to motivate, give you purpose, meaning, and fulfillment every day of your life, and what's going to be the best thing for you and your family. But the purpose of this video is I want you to go into it with open eyes. There's a lot of great things, and obviously this is what I do for a living. I recruit senior leaders into these amazing companies, some of them that have gone from zero to hundreds of millions of dollars and have made so many people wealthy. But there's always a risk profile on the other end, and you've got to look at it with open eyes. So if you like this video, please hit the subscribe button. As I said earlier, it makes a tremendous difference in my ability to grow the channel, be successful, and continue to make great content for you. The likes are wonderful, and comments and engagement are great too. If there's anything you want me to expand upon, any subject what you want me to write about, or just general feedback, let me know if you like what you see. If you think that Tim is completely off base, or you have a different perspective or a different experience, hey, we'll throw in that in the mix. Write that in the comments. It's all good. We're just trying to provide education out there in the marketplace and multiple perspectives. As I've said in other videos, if you're thinking about leaving your company, making a job change or a career change, and you don't know exactly how to start, download my free 4-step preparation guide that you can find on the YouTube channel at www.dreamjobamerica guide. Is going to provide a foundation for you to think about what you need to be doing to launch your own job search. And that's it for now. Please join me next week for part number 4, which I think is going to be the most exciting, which is going to be how now do I determine whether working for a small company is going to be the right fit for me and my family personally. Until then, stay healthy, stay safe.